to discuss issues within the MK party and some of the biggest political news coming out this week. I'm now joined by political analyst, Professor Dirk Kotzé. Prof, a very good afternoon to you. Thanks very much for your time. Let me begin by what we saw there, that little bite. I had this conversation with the spokesperson of the MK party who, as you heard there, said, no, there was nothing untoward, even though I pointed out to him that this was unheard of, what the party announced yesterday. I don't know what you made of it.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's very difficult to really understand what has happened here. It sounds as if internally MK was not well organized at the time of determining who their candidates will be and then who will ultimately be on the list. And they had some opportunities to finalize the list just before the inauguration or the swearing in of the members of parliament. At the same time, we know that President Zuma went to court in order when his name was removed from the list as a possible candidate. So to say that President Zuma was never on the list and it was not meant for him to be on the list while he was fighting to be on the list sounds a bit like a contradiction. But I think the main point here is we have to see, I think, also in light of the fact of the other changes in MK. For example, the Secretary General that has been now removed from the position. Because normally there's one person, and it's very often the office of the Secretary General of a party, that is responsible for the final lists, that submit them to the IEC in the first instance as candidates for the election, and then also that finalize it and deal with the IEC when they hand it over to Parliament. So to say, therefore, that it has been sabotaged means that there is no that coherence in the MK in terms of taking responsibility for this process that numerous persons could have been involved in, if this is the real argument, and that there was no sort of a organizational discipline and prudence in the way in which this matter has happened. I think there's obviously some other issues also involved. It is not so straightforward. And that it is about the fact that MK has not yet had an elective conference, so they don't have an established leadership, at least at the national level. And now the fact that there are opportunities for them both at national level as well as especially in KwaZulu-Natal, but also to some extent in the Mpumalanga provincial legislature, becomes very attractive. And there's internal competition for those positions. And I think we are seeing that this is most possibly an indication of that internal contestation that is taking place for those positions.
Yeah, I mean, the party is yet to put together, policies. It is yet to establish structures. In a situation like that, one would imagine, things can, go wrong. Add to that the fact that they've actually done well. I think they've surprised themselves, even though they're insisting that they could have done even better. But all those things put together. But then you would expect, leadership where like a bit of a firm hand, but that's also driven by, where things make sense. They are logical. They are commonsensical. I don't know how you can say to someone, no, you're going to Parliament, but only for a few days or weeks. Otherwise, we're going to change you tomorrow or next week. That just doesn't make a great deal of sense to me.
No, it doesn't. And the way in which I understand the information that we have received as outsiders, is that the Speaker, Ms. Tokududisa, wrote a letter to all of them, not only those who they claim have been sworn in, but all of them, to say that they are not members of Parliament. And for her to do that means that they must have been members of Parliament. Otherwise, she has no authority over them in order to say that they are not anymore members of Parliament. And I think she's experienced enough not to make a mistake like that, to become involved in internal party matters. Both the IEC as well as Parliament and the Office of the Speaker specifically deals with the official leadership of these political parties, and they give instructions to either the IEC during the time of elections, or no, when it is about parliamentary matters, to the Office of the Speaker, to determine or to act on members that they want to withdraw, that they want to change, or whether they want to change the list of their reserve candidates once a year. That goes ultimately through the IEC and through the Speaker. So from the Parliament side, they have to take someone's word on that they act on and speak on behalf of a particular political party, and in this case now MK. But it looks to me as if that is where the real problem is that there is not the central channel of communication, the formal communication that of who speaks on behalf of MK. Because as the reports are saying, is that President Zuma was not aware of this decision. He had removed the Secretary General, who I would suspect is the one that must be responsible for this type of communication with Parliament specifically, as well as with the members. But now there's this reports or speculation to say that President Zuma's daughter has become involved in this. Now, if that is the case, then a type of a Congress of the People scenario is emerging. Of internal struggling, internal squabbles about leadership positions. And that is bad news, if that is indeed the case, if that will be bad news for MK.
Yeah, because, I mean, it does certainly sort of make the ground fertile for internal wranglings, but also factionalism, which I put to the spokesperson yesterday. But I was also looking at some of the names that are being thrown around of people who will be, the MK party is going to send to Parliament. You're Lucky Montana, who, as you know, once led one of our big parastatals. Brian Molefe, same story. I saw the name of Adil Nchabeleng, who's been a commentator on energy, ESCOM issues. I'm looking at the person who is the leader of the MK party in Parliament, the former Justice President of the Western Cape, and I'm looking at people like Andile Mutama, who've been there before, and the like. And one wonders what the thinking is behind putting forward those names instead of perhaps lesser known names, but who may well be strong, people who may not have heard from, but who will surprise us when they go to Parliament. People that maybe some of us can look up and say, whoa, that's a breath of fresh air. Who's this guy? And then I don't know what you make of the preferences for people to go to Parliament.
Yes, well, we don't know really what is the procedure that's being followed within MK to decide who their candidates will be, or before the election specifically, and now when they want to replace them, because the way in which they can do that now is basically that their reserve list they must completely remove, so that they have no reserve list, and only then they can come up with new names. And that applied also to Dr. Sloppy, that he was not on the original list, and in order to bring him into Parliament, they had to completely revamp or remove their reserve list of candidates of the total 200 for the National Assembly. So in that sense, it's very difficult to speculate. I mean, these are well-known names in terms of, especially, and they were very much involved in different positions during the time of President Zuma's administration as president. And I think this is a way in which we possibly want to bring back persons who people know of, that they have some recognition value, but at the same time, their record of performance is questionable. Some of them appeared very extensively, for example, in the Zondo Commission. report. So the logic of this is something very difficult to understand at the moment. The problem with that logic is that persons who have come closer to the end of their public career are not going to invest the time that young persons, new members of parliament who still see it as a future for themselves will be put into it. So it's not a way of cultivating a generation of parliamentarians and public representatives with whom they can move forward for a long term. This is actually a very short term perspective, because most of these members or persons will not be willing to go into and put all their weight behind the role that they will play in Parliament. They will, because they are most possibly involved in many other activities also. And I think that is, I would say, the downside of it. But the major point, I think, from a public point of view, is that a number of these persons have credibility is under question. And therefore, it will also reflect on the MK party ultimately. And it will confirm this public notion or public perception that it is actually a party of President Zuma and not a party as it is presented by him and others as an alternative for the ANC and a new voice, and a new a major political player on the political landscape.
Speaking of logic and the new generation of public representatives, I was also surprised the other day to see a member of Rise Mzansi, who is now going to be a councillor of the Good Party. And the two political parties have agreed that he will have dual membership. He's a member of Rise Mzansi, but will be in council as a member of the Good Party, and everyone is fine with this. Is this a new politics that we should get used to, where people are conducting themselves in ways that perhaps we are not accustomed to? But it's a new reality.
No, I don't think so. I think this is very over pragmatic. It's over trying to deal with a particular situation, but as a general rule of application within political parties, it is undoable. It is something which will confuse the public. It is something which will undermine those political parties, because otherwise the public will say, but if they are so interchangeable, what is then the difference between these two parties? Why didn't they merge? Why are they not one? So in that sense, it's not an approach that should be followed by any political party. It will undermine their identity. It will undermine the way in which they are recognized by the public, the way in which they are associated with specific views that give them a specific appeal to their supporters. And a practice like this will completely confuse the public. And I think it's something that must be avoided at all costs.
But you have a government of national unity now. Initially, we were told, President Cyril Ramaphosa is the leader, but you have Helen Zille, the federal chairperson of the DA, saying a party with 20% should have or reserves the right to implement its own policies. We're not being tagged along, but we're determined to make our presence felt. And if no one or other people don't understand that, then this GNU is not going to be worth the paper it's written on.
Yes, I fully agree with you. In order for the GNU to function, it must have a policy, a collective policy, a policy that all the members of the GNU agree with or can work with. They don't have to necessarily agree with every single component of it, but they must be able to support it in general. And the policy that's implemented is not one of these political parties. If that is the case, then the GNU will collapse very soon. Because it's not a compilation of individual parties who are simply together, but each one of them can implement their own policies. And it has never been the idea of any coalition anywhere in the world that's how it is done. So if that is the attempt that is going to be made by some of the parties, and I cannot really believe that the DA can believe this, if it is indeed so, that they will be able to do it. But they can do, and I think this is where coalitions and something like a government of national unity is a complex concept, is that there is a distinction between the executive, that means the members of the government, the cabinet members and the deputy ministers, and their representatives in parliament. Those parties are in parliament are still representing their individual parties there. And they can therefore promote their own ideas within parliament. But when it comes to a decision by parliament, by the majority of parliament, about what will be the official policy, for example, in the form of legislation or of a budget, then it becomes the collective responsibility of all the members of the government of national unity. And they have also, in the statement of intent right in the beginning, already gave some sort of general guidelines about, or accepted some general guidelines about how they will deal with matters within the cabinet when some of the parties are not necessarily in full agreement with the ultimate decision by the cabinet. So it's going to be a difficult one. We are going to see it very visible in a very tangible way in 2 years' time with the local government election, when these parties are going to campaign against each other for positions at local government level. But that should not, in essence, in principle, threaten the existence of the government of national unity. It will test their loyalty to the government of national unity, but it's not necessarily there to undermine it, because in 1995, the same thing happened. There was also a local government election, and the ANC and the New National Party and the IFP contested as individual parties, in that without the government of national unity collapsing. So I hope that sense of maturity will exist by then, so that these parties can understand the different roles that they are playing in different specific situations.
Professor Dirk Kotzé, thank you very much for your time.